still living in an emergency. COVID-19 is here and is going to keep being here in our communities until such a time as we have a vaccine or else much better treatment than we have now. Yes, we're talking about an economic recovery, and we're putting in the building blocks of it because Canada has managed to control the spread of COVID-19. But as we're seeing with cases rising, Canadians need to continue to be vigilant.
This is the Arlene Biden Show on Canada Talks.
And there we have the message from the Prime Minister. We're getting ready. As we talked about at the beginning of the show, the word Christmas is coming up. Also today marks a milestone in our country, 10,000 COVID-19 deaths. We're in a second wave many of us hoped would not arrive, and it is here on our doorsteps. Joining us is Dr. Rewat Deonathan, who's an epidemiologist, associate professor at the University of Ottawa. Doctor, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You know, this 10,000 mark, it's something to take stock of where we are. As we just heard the Prime Minister saying, we've managed to control the spread. Would you agree with that? And considering what we're seeing in other countries around the world, some that thought they had this, how much of a danger is this second wave at this moment, in your opinion?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in your statement. Have we successfully controlled this? I'm not so sure that we have. We're in a dangerous time right now. The winter is just starting. It's going to be long and dark. The flu season is upon us. Hospitals are starting to get filled. And unlike the first wave, unlike the spring, everything is open now. Right? So back in the spring, we sort of created more hospital capacity. We closed schools. We had delayed surgeries. But now, the ability to absorb COVID cases is greatly diminished. So we're in a very dangerous time right now.
Dangerous time. You know, we've seen it. We had a guest join us from Denmark, and they had been getting a lot of press about how great they were doing. And the reporter said, it is amazing how suddenly the second wave, how quickly it spreads. Is that because of what you've just said? Because that really struck me. This is different. This is more of a powder keg. We'd lock down. There is no lockdown, and it could drive this thing.
We sort of got lucky in the first wave. It would happen in spring, so things were about to get warmer, which means that we could go outside very soon and diminish transmission that way. Schools were going to close anyway, so that potential for a super spreading event was taken off the table. And we had, a little more capacity and public tolerance for closing some things. Now all those things are pretty much, out the window. So we're much more dangerous now. And historically, like with the Spanish flu of 1918, the second wave was bigger. And so there's a very real chance the second wave could be bigger as well. And we're certainly seeing that in some countries. News today from Russia, for example, their hospitals are completely overwhelmed. France is seeing an overwhelmed system too. And that might be our path.
Let me ask you, what about the politicizing of this? COVID says the president, almost like a childhood taunt there, and there are those who see liberty in not following some of these restrictions. How are you viewing this from an epidemiologist's point of view?
It's amazing. I mean, when we first thought about how to respond to an epidemic or a pandemic of this nature, years ago, we thought about deploying our surveillance systems and our testing capacity and rapid vaccine development. We never thought we'd have to deal with misinformation and active disinformation, and as well as a population that was resistant to the public health plans to curtail the spread. So that's been a little bit surprising, but we're several months into this, and you think we'd have a better handle on how to deal with it, and we really don't. So it is problematic that this is being so heavily politicized. And I do have to wonder at some point how much of this is intentional, because the disinformation is intentional, but the misinformation is a bigger problem. So by that I mean we have science by press release, science by YouTube video. We have people putting out interesting conclusions about this being a hoax, etc., which is completely unfounded. Real science moves more slowly and by a peer review, which is less accessible. So this is an opportunity to revisit everything we know about public health communications and science communications in general.
Yeah, I just don't know how you solve it, because you're absolutely right. Many of us are shaking our heads and saying, is this political manipulation? Is this political strategy? We understand that parties have to have strategy, and we welcome them. We welcome oppositions and the way our democracy works. On the other hand, if real information about a real pandemic is being weaponized, well, that's a cause for alarm, just like this pandemic.
It's true, but this is par for the course with everything else in society right now, starting from the 2016 U.S. federal elections, when fake news entered our vocabulary, where conspiracy theories were amplified. Now, every small fringe theory gets an enormous audience by virtue of social media and by virtue of, some disreputable media corners who want to amplify it. So the fact that we have QAnon as a conspiracy in the USA, things like that, that's all part and parcel of the same phenomenon. So whoever can fix this will win a Nobel Prize in some capacity, because I'm at a loss as well of how to address this problem.
It's true. What has it done to the scientific community as we begin the second wave? So worrisome, trying to project are people hedging, saying things? Or are they going full steam ahead?
Oh, this is a big problem. I mean, I spend a good 2/3 of my day combating misinformation, and I get a lot of hate mail. And so a lot of my colleagues are really hesitant to poke their heads out to, comment on the science because they're afraid of getting attacked from various circles. So it is a problem. Again, no one anticipated when going into science that we'd have to worry about public repercussions for just our ability to assess data. So again, it's an opportunity to revisit what it means to be a scientist and how to deploy science communication and to protect ourselves and our psychologies. It is frustrating, it is tiring, it is exhausting, but at the same time, this is why the taxpayers pay us our salaries. So this is our time to step up and show us what we can do.
I want to ask you a big question is, as we look at things and, it's been used politically, they were wrong, they said not to wear masks. How much in pandemic preparation is put into the psychology of that message? Is there an effort not to panic people? I mean, sometimes I would look at things and wonder and say, okay, are they saying that they don't want to panic people, or is that being adjusted as it goes along?
It's a really good question, and the answer is there isn't a long-term strategy or plan or a lot of thinking that goes into this. Most of the messaging is built around, well, here's the information we have, and here's how we make it understandable to most people, which usually means simplifying it to some extent. Now, increasingly, there is a concern about, message management and behavioral control, which has its own ethics component to it. So, for example, back in the anti-smoking campaigns, we'd have pictures of diseased lungs on cigarette cartons. That was done to compel people to behave a certain way. Now, if you want to compel behavioral change, it's a little paternalistic. It's like saying, I know what's best for you, and you don't know what's best for yourself. So there is a school of thought that holds that maybe the best strategy is to be transparent with the data and how we interpret it and let people make up their own minds as functioning adults. The danger, of course, is then even if they're informed and choose a dangerous path, that is democratic, but ultimately deleterious to the greater communal good. So what do you do then? It's a problem. And to answer your question directly, I don't think a lot of thought goes into psychology. I really don't. But panic control is definitely a part of it, but it's not overtly thought about.